Welcome to the Neuro Rebel Podcast, where brains of all kinds don't just survive, they thrive, sparkle, and occasionally throw glitter bombs at the status quo. I'm Anita, your host, and whether you're tuning in from your morning commute, your favorite reading chair, or taking a break between meetings, imagine we're sharing a space designed just for us. No judgment, no pressure, just real conversation about what it means to be neurodivergent in a world that assumes everyone thinks, learns, and processes information the exact same way. Get comfortable. Settle in wherever you are. You know that feeling when you find a conversation that makes you think differently about something you thought you understood? That's our vibe here. Now, before we dive into today's topic, let me ask you something. Have you ever felt like you're playing a video game where everyone else got the strategy guide, but you're stuck trying to figure out if you're holding the controller upside down? Like you're trying to dance to a rhythm everyone else hears in perfect 4/4 time, but your brain insists on throwing in some jazz improv and maybe a little interpretive movement? If that hits different, and I bet it does, then welcome home, community. You're exactly where you need to be. Today, we are tackling the neurodiversity paradigm. Now, paradigm might sound like academic jargon, and honestly, it kind of is. But the idea behind it is beautifully simple and incredibly powerful. It provides a fundamental shift in how humanity understands brains like ours. The neurodiversity paradigm is about the language we use to define what's normal, what's valuable, and what's possible for human minds. And why start with something that sounds like theory? Because language isn't just how we talk about neurodivergence, it's how we think about it, and ultimately how we treat it. Every word carries a world view. Disorder carries a belief that different brains need fixing. Neurodiversity carries the belief that different brains need understanding. These aren't just vocabulary choices. They're competing blueprints for how to build schools, write policies, and see one another. They're belief systems masquerading as medical terms. So we start with language because once you see the beliefs hidden in the words, you can't unsee them. And that's when real change begins. It's 3 a.m. I'm Googling, why does everything hurt for the 100th time this month? Why can't I just make my brain do the things it used to do? Fluorescent lights feel like daggers. Small talk feels like calculus. And my brain, this brain that was supposedly high functioning and had it all together, suddenly can't figure out how to navigate a simple encounter without wanting to crawl under the table and cry. The search results are useless. Try meditation, they say. Maybe it's stress. Just get over it. Or try this or that medication. Nothing worked. But then, buried on page 4 of some obscure forum, I find a word that changes everything. Autism. I'm 52 years old, and I've just discovered that my brain isn't broken. It's just been speaking a different language this whole time. And nobody, not therapists, not psychiatrists, including me, knew how to translate. That discovery didn't just change my life. It sent me down a rabbit hole that revealed how a handful of autistic people typing in 1990s chat rooms sparked a linguistic revolution that's rewriting policies, paychecks, and possibilities for millions of minds worldwide. Hey, community, and welcome to the episode 1 of informed neurodiversity. Here's what you need to know about me. I'm autistic, gifted, and spent my entire professional life collecting achievements like they were Pokemon cards. Degrees, tenure, publications, a Fulbright, all while feeling like I was wearing an ill-fitting human suit that everyone else seemed to find perfectly comfortable, but failing spectacularly at being human. Autistic burnout and depression finally forced me to step away from academia. But plot twist, it also led me to the most important discovery of my life. Understanding my neurodivergence didn't just explain my past, it revolutionized my future. And now I'm here, building this podcast from Mexico, where I volunteer with autistic adults, because I'm passionate about one thing: making sure nobody else has to wait 50 years to understand their own brain. Today, we're deep diving into the neurodiversity paradigm, and trust me, this isn't your therapist's medical model. We're going to explore how the words we use to describe different brains literally changes laws, lives, and who gets to thrive versus barely survive. Whether you're neurodivergent, love someone who is, work with different minds, or are just curious why your coworker needs those noise-canceling headphones to function, this is for you. And for those tuning in from Buenos Aires to Miami, from Mexico City to Madrid, we're building a global conversation here because different minds exist everywhere, even if the language to describe us is still catching up. Ready to flip everything you thought you knew about being normal on its head? Let's do it. Let's start with a thesis that might scramble your circuits. The way we talk about different brains isn't just semantics. It's the scaffolding that determines who gets support versus stigma, who gets accommodated versus alienated, and who gets to define the narrative of their own minds. But first, let me give you some context. For over a century, the world has understood autism, ADHD, dyslexia, and other neurodevelopmental conditions through what we call the medical model. This is the framework that shaped how doctors, educators, therapists, and society at large have approached neurological differences. The medical model sees these conditions as medical problems residing within individuals. That is, disorders to be diagnosed, treated, and ideally cured or at least managed to minimize their impact. Under the medical model, the goal is to help people with these conditions become as normal as possible. It's the reason why for decades the focus has been on eliminating autistic behaviors, medicating ADHD to reduce symptoms, and intensive interventions to help dyslexic kids read the right way. Let me paint you a picture of how this plays out. Picture this. Little Maria is in 3rd grade. She reads at college level, but she can't tie her shoes. She notices that leaves have exactly 37 veins, but misses that her classmate is crying. During recess, she catalogs cloud types, while other kids play tag. Under the medical model, the dominant framework for the last century, Maria has deficits. She needs social skill training, occupational therapy, and interventions to make her appear more normal. But here's the thing about the medical model that nobody talks about at cocktail parties. It assumes there's one correct way for a brain to work, and any deviation is a bug to be fixed rather than a feature to be understood. Enter the neurodiversity paradigm, stage left, wearing a cape and possibly stimming.
At this time, I'm going to ask you to fasten your seatbelts.
The neurodiversity paradigm emerged in the 1990s as a radically different way of understanding these same neurological differences. But instead of seeing them as disorders or deficits, it views them as natural variations in human neurology, part of the normal spectrum of human biodiversity. The neurodiversity paradigm says, wait a minute, what if Maria's brain isn't broken at all? What if she's part of the natural variation in human neurology? Like how some people have brown eyes and others have blue. Some are night owls and others are morning larks. Nobody sends left-handed people to therapy to become right-handed anymore. Why don't we diagnose blue eyes as a pigmentation deficit? So why do we still treat neurological differences as disorders to be fixed rather than variations to be understood? The neurodiversity paradigm gets it. Neurological differences can create real struggles. I struggle every day. But it asks a different question. Are you struggling because something's wrong with you, or because the world around you only works for one type of brain? Let me translate that with a story that'll make you want to flip tables in the best way possible. I once had a colleague, a brilliant researcher, published prolifically. Students loved her, but she struggled in meetings, needed written agendas, and processed information differently. She took notes in colors that looked like rainbow explosions. The university's response? Send her to communication workshops. Suggest she try harder to, quote, fit in. Nobody asked, what if we just give her written agendas? Let her take rainbow notes. Recognized that her different processing style was exactly what made her research innovative. She left academia. The university lost a brilliant mind. All because they were treating her differences as defects, rather than designing an environment where different minds could thrive. This is what the neurodiversity paradigm challenges. Instead of asking, how do we fix the person? It asks, how do we fix the environment? Now, I can already hear some of you thinking, but Anita, what about people with significant support needs? What about real challenges? Great question, hypothetical listener with excellent critical thinking skills. The neurodiversity paradigm isn't about pretending challenges don't exist or that everyone's needs are the same. It's about recognizing that disability happens at the intersection of individual differences and environmental barriers. Think about it this way. A person who uses a wheelchair isn't disabled by their legs. They're disabled by the stairs. The disability rights movement taught us to build ramps. The neurodiversity paradigm is teaching us to build cognitive ramps and change the language we use to describe neurodivergent people and our struggles. Here's the key distinction. Neurodiversity refers to the fact that human brains vary. It's a biological reality, like biodiversity. Neurodivergent describes individuals whose brains diverge from typical patterns. We are all part of neurodiversity. We are all neurodiverse. But not everyone is neurodivergent. Got it? Good, because this distinction is about to matter in ways that affect everything, from insurance codes to identity information. Here's today's million-dollar thesis. Language isn't just how we describe reality, it's the tool we use to construct it. And when it comes to neurodivergence, vocabulary literally shapes policy, funding, and whether kids get support or stigma. It matters. Language matters. Let me tell you a story about bureaucratic absurdity that's like trying to cancel a gym membership through a maze of automated phone menus. And it would make your insurance company nervous. Once upon a time, 1980 to be exact, autism was classified as infantile autism in the DSM-3. Infantile, as in only for infants. As in, apparently autistic kids magically transform into neurotypical adults at midnight on their 18th birthday, like some reverse Cinderella situation. Trust me, autistic adults exist. And why is this important? Because the DSM is the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual, psychiatry's Bible, the big book of official diagnoses that every mental health professional uses. When your therapist says you have ADHD or your kid gets an autism diagnosis, they are using the DSM criteria. Insurance companies worship this book. If it's not in the DSM, good luck getting coverage or even diagnosed. If it's not there, it doesn't exist. Insurance companies looked at the word infantile and made a business decision. Autism is a childhood disorder. No adult coverage needed. Fast forward through decades of autistic adults being misdiagnosed with everything from schizophrenia to just being difficult. In 2013, the DSM did something revolutionary. They officially said, hey, autism doesn't end at age 18. That single update changed everything. Adults could finally get diagnosed instead of being told that they were too old to be autistic. Insurance had to pay attention. Services had to grow up with their clients. In 2022, the ICD-11 reclassified autism as a neurodevelopmental condition rather than a disorder. The ICD-11 is the World Health Organization's diagnostic manual. It's what most of the world uses for medical billing codes, which means it directly controls what treatments get covered and for diagnoses of all health conditions. Tiny word change, but massive implication shift. Billing codes exist for accommodations, not just treatment. Support tools, environmental adaptations, not just individual fixes. The linguistic mathematics are staggering. Change disorder to condition, and millions of dollars in different services are unleashed. Change treatment to support, and fundamentally different approaches to help appear. Change deficit to difference, and it completely transforms self-concepts for actual human beings. But here's where it gets juicy enough for Netflix to option. The insurance companies didn't make these changes from the goodness of their actuarial hearts. They were forced by something unprecedented. Autistic people who learned to speak fluent bureaucracy. The neurodiversity movement's greatest innovation wasn't just claiming that different wasn't deficit. It was learning to translate that truth into the language of power, policy papers, diagnostic manuals, and insurance codes. Let me paint you a picture of how this plays out in real life, beyond the spreadsheets and committee meetings. Meet Jamie, not the real name, but the real story. Diagnosed ADHD at 35. Their insurance covered medication to make them less ADHD. End of coverage story. Then their therapist, one of those radical rebels who actually listened to the neurodivergent people, gets creative with coding. And instead of treating ADHD, they're now supporting executive function differences and providing environmental adaptation strategies. Suddenly, insurance covers noise-canceling headphones for sensory accommodation, task management apps for cognitive support, and flexible work schedules for environmental modification. Same brain, same challenges, different words, completely different life outcomes. This is linguistic alchemy, turning the lead of pathology into the gold of accommodation, one vocabulary shift at a time. But, and this is crucial, language doesn't just change systems, it changes souls. When you grow up hearing your brain described with words like disordered, deficient, impaired, those words don't just live in diagnostic manuals. They move into your self-concept, set up shop, and redecorate with shame curtains. I spent 50 years thinking I was a broken neurotypical person, desperately trying to pass as functional. I thought I came from another planet and had lost all hope to ever fit in or that someone, anyone, would understand me. The day I learned the language of neurodiversity, that I was a perfectly valid autistic person who'd been playing in the wrong rule book, everything shifted. There was an identity transformation. The neurodiversity paradigm's vocabulary doesn't just describe different experiences. It provides the language people need to understand and advocate for themselves. My executive dysfunction became different processing needs. My sensory overwhelm became environmental sensitivity requiring accommodation. My inability to engage in small talk became a communication difference, not a deficit. Same brain, same me, revolutionary new user manual. Ready for the wildest plot in this history of the language and neurodiversity? The internet. Yes. That same internet where people argue about pineapple and pizza became the underground railroad for the neurodiversity movement, and autistic people were the conductors. 1993. The internet sounds like R2-D2 having an existential crisis. Most people are still trying to figure out what the @ symbol means. But in obscure corners of cyberspace, something revolutionary is brewing. For the first time in human history, autistic people can communicate without the sensory overwhelm of face-to-face interaction. No eye contact required, no real-time processing pressure, no fluorescent lights, just text, time, and the radical possibility of finding others like you. Neurological diversity, Batman. Did they find each other? Wait, you rehearse conversations too? You mean everyone doesn't need a recovery after they go grocery shopping? Hold up. You're telling me organizing my books by the color spectrum and publication date isn't standard? These weren't just random internet conversations. These were identity-forming moments happening at 4.4 kilobits per second. Enter Jim Sinclair, who dropped what I consider the neurodiversity movement's Declaration of Independence in 1993. The essay, "Don't Mourn for Us." Core revolutionary statement: autism isn't something a person has. It's a way of being. It is not possible to separate the person from the autism. The medical model just got served, dial-up style. What followed was the most quietly radical revolution you've never heard of. International organizations like Autism Network International started hosting online conferences. Not conferences about autistic people, conferences by and for autistic people. The paradigm shift was real. For the first time, autistic people weren't case studies or patients or subjects. They were the experts on their own experience, building community and theory in real time. But here's where it gets spicy enough to trend on whatever social media platform the kids are using these days. The online autistic community didn't just find each other. They started comparative analysis. They realized those sensory issues that the doctors wanted to eliminate, actually, it was a crucial self-regulation strategy. Those obsessive interests that needed moderating, they are often the source of deep expertise and career paths. The social deficits requiring intensive intervention might actually be cultural differences between neurotypes. When autistic people started comparing notes online, they didn't just build a community. They crowdsourced a complete reframe of what autism really and actually meant. Let me give you my favorite example of this paradigm shift in action, and that's stimming. For decades, the therapeutic goal was to eliminate stereotyped behaviors. Hand flapping, rocking, spinning, and that was to make autistic kids indistinguishable from their peers. That is, to transform them into neurotypical kids. Quiet your hands, still your bodies. Then the online autistic community compared notes and went, wait a minute. Stimming helps us regulate sensory input, process emotions, maintain focus, express joy, manage anxiety. Stopping stimming wasn't helping. It was like forcing someone to hold their breath. Sure, they could do it for a while, but at what cost? Research confirms what autistic people knew all along. Stimming is adaptive, not pathological. Suppressing it correlates with increased anxiety, depression, and something we now call autistic burnout. But it took autistic people saying, hey, maybe ask us about our own experiences for science to catch up. When marginalized communities gain platforms to share collective experiences, they don't just tell stories, they generate legitimate expertise that challenges professional paradigms. The conversation moved from chat rooms to LiveJournal to Twitter to TikTok. Each platform shift brought new voices, new perspectives, and new ways to challenge the medical model's monopoly on meaning. And then something unexpected happened. The corporations started paying attention. Not out of altruism, let's be real, but because they noticed something the medical model missed. Many of their most innovative employees were neurodivergent. The pattern recognition skills, the systematic thinking, the ability to spot errors others missed, the hyperfocus that could solve problems abandoned. Capitalism meets neurodiversity. When businesses realized neurodivergent minds could mean competitive advantage, the conversation shifted from charity to strategy. And suddenly, everyone wanted to talk about neurological diversity. Microsoft launched an autism hiring program. SAP followed, then EY, Dell, Goldman Sachs, Walt Disney, and others. Not perfect programs, we'll critique those another day. But a fundamental shift. Neurodivergence is an asset, not just an accommodation need. The movement that started with autistic people typing in the digital darkness had officially gone mainstream. The neurodiversity paradigm isn't just a Western academic concept. It's a global human rights movement adapting to local cultures while maintaining universal principles of dignity and self-determination. Remember how I mentioned I'm building this podcast for a global community? That's a recognition that neurodivergent brains exist everywhere, but the language and support for them varies wildly by geography, culture, and who holds the linguistic power. Let me tell you about my volunteer work here in Mexico, where I work with an organization supporting autistic adults. The linguistic battles here are fascinating and infuriating in equal measure. In Spanish, the medical establishment clings to the term disorder, but advocacy groups are pushing for condition, or even better, neurodivergence. Every family meeting where we use the term condition instead of disorder, we watch parents' shoulders drop. Their questions shift from, how do I fix this, to how do I support this? Language shapes reality in every culture. The words available in each language don't just describe neurodivergence, they prescribe how societies respond to it. In Japan, the concept of connection or bonds influences how neurodiversity is understood. The movement there focuses less on individual rights and more on relational harmony. How can different minds maintain harmony while being autistic? In India, neurodiversity advocates navigate complex intersections of caste, class, and linguistic diversity, fighting for recognition in Hindi, English, Tamil, Bengali, and dozens of other languages, each with its own cultural weight. In Brazil, the term neurodiversity is gaining ground, but advocates face the challenge of translating concepts across Portuguese while combating deeply entrenched medical model thinking. The neurodiversity movement's core principles translate across cultures, but its expression must be culturally fluent to create real change. What works in Manhattan won't necessarily work in Mumbai, Mexico City, or Montevideo, but the fundamental recognition that neurological diversity is part of human diversity resonates everywhere. Young neurodivergent people worldwide aren't waiting for permission to claim their narratives. They are creating content, building communities, and demanding recognition in every language, on every platform, in every corner of our connected world. The revolution that started in English language chat rooms is now a multilingual, multicultural movement that refuses to be silenced. So here we are, community. We've traveled from my 3 a.m. desperate Googling to global movements, from insurance codes to identity revolutions, from dial-up forums to international advocacy. The neurodiversity paradigm isn't just an academic framework. It's an invitation to co-create a world where every kind of mind can thrive. And that invitation is addressed to you. Let me be crystal clear about something. This isn't about pretending differences don't create challenges. My executive dysfunction is real. Sensory overwhelm can be debilitating. Social communication can be isolating. But the neurodiversity paradigm says, what if we stopped trying to eliminate these differences and started accommodating them? What if we designed classrooms, workplaces, and communities that expected neurological diversity instead of being surprised by it? Your mission, should you choose to accept it this week, change one word, just one. If you're a teacher, try different learning style instead of learning disability. If you're a parent, use support needs instead of deficits. If you're a therapist, ask about environmental barriers and not just behavioral challenges. If you're an employer, think accommodation, not special treatment. If you're neurodivergent, try describing yourself with language that acknowledges your challenges without defining you by them. And if you're a human being with an interest in these issues, notice the language used around you. Question it, challenge it, change it. Here's how to join this global community. Subscribe to Neuro Rebel wherever you get your podcasts. Leave us a rating and review. It helps other members of our community find us in the vast podcast universe. And I am eternally grateful for your support. Visit neurorebelpodcast.com for transcripts, resources, and ways to share your story. Because this movement isn't complete without your voice. I would welcome your participation in this podcast. You can even leave a voice message on my website. I'm building this as a global community. Whether you're in Argentina, where I grew up, the United States, where I built my career, or Mexico, where I live now, or anywhere else on this beautiful neurodiverse planet, I want to hear from you. Have a story about how language changed your life? Want to share how neurodiversity is understood in your culture? Are you interested in being part of future episodes? Email us or contact us through our website. You are not broken. You are not a puzzle with a missing piece. You are not a problem to be solved. You're part of the natural variation in human neurology. Your challenges are real and deserve support. Your differences are valid and deserve respect. Your voice matters and deserves to be heard. The neurodiversity paradigm isn't just changing how we think about different brains. is changing who gets to do the thinking. Nothing about us without us. So welcome to the Neuro Rebel community. Together, we're not just surviving in a neurotypical world, we are building a neurodiverse one. Until next time, this is Anita, your friendly neighborhood Neuro Rebel, reminding you that normal is a setting on a washing machine and not a measure of human worth. Keep stimming, keep questioning, and keep building a world where every kind of mind can thrive. Thank you for listening. See you in the next episode.